I want to talk to you about the cuts that Reagan is making. I voted for Reagan, and I'm sorry I ever voted for Reagan. What right did he have to take away the students' benefits from deceased veterans? This hurts, really. How does that student go to college these days without that allowance? And why doesn't he take the cuts from the big business instead of the small?
What do you mean by cuts from big business? What do you mean by that?
Why doesn't he go after the big mercantile concerns?
What do you mean by go after big mercantile concerns?
Let him deduct taxes and expenses from them instead of taking it out on the small people, the people who are collecting Social Security,
Security is not being cut. I wish they would stop saying Social Security.
My parents gave
Grants? Why did you get the grants?
Though the tuition was high.
Because the tuition was high. So some taxpayer got soaked so that you could get these grants. Okay, go ahead. Others get soaked when student loans are defaulted on, which many have been. I just want to point this out because we could have 1,000,001 conversations between now and 6 o'clock.
Okay, let me make it.
And people like you could call and say, oh, gee, what you got, and so forth and so on. But in order for you to have gotten, somebody else had to give.
Right. Well, let me just say, I don't know if the outcome, I've been hearing the outcome of the 1980 election. If you want to, look closer at that election, you'll find that a good portion, perhaps half of the eligible voters did not vote.
Oh, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that suddenly we're going to interpret that those who didn't vote maybe had something else in mind?
No, but I don't think...
Is that how you run a democracy, by trying to interpret the will of the non-voting people?
No, it is not. But it is also...
No, where it's written in the United States Constitution, and it says anybody shall be able to be on the dole for as long as he wants, no matter what.
Only in America.
If there were a money tree, I'd say, fine, we'll just pick it off the money tree, give it to everybody, fine. But there is no money tree. There's hard-working men and women who have been breaking their back to pay the taxes to make these programs continue. And I say it's time we think about those people who've been breaking their backs. Is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author who wrote that great biography about Robert Moses, discloses that Lyndon Johnson accepted envelopes, quote, stuffed with cash when he was vice president, and later used the power of his presidency to amass enormous personal wealth. And, of course, when Lyndon Baines Johnson was president, I was not broadcasting in this city, but was broadcasting on the West Coast. And if anybody in the audience remembers the great affection I had for lumbering Lyndon, they will know that I'm not surprised over the revelations that Robert Caro has uncovered. But when Johnson assumed the presidency in 1963, his aides were quoted as saying that estimates that put his wealth at $14 million were too high. Privately, some now admit that it was far too low. Johnson personally directed his business affairs down to the most minute details, not infrequently working on those affairs, according to some of his attorneys, for several hours a day while he was president. See, he told everybody, he said, I've got that in a blind trust. Only Lady Bird knows. Well, Bill Moyers, who was Johnson's White House press secretary, said yesterday that he had never heard reports about Johnson accepting cash as vice president or directing private business dealings across special Oval Office phones as president. Both of those are news to me, Bill Moyers said. I was involved only with politics and legislation. Well, what would you expect Bill Moyers to say? But there's a lot more to the story, and it'll all be out in a book, and excerpts from the book will be appearing in the October issue of the Atlantic Monthly. Spiro Agnew, you've got company. Trade. Now, it cuts both ways. For example, when Jimmy Carter was president, one of the first things he did was he imposed a quota on the importation of foreign shoes. And after that, the shoe prices went through the ceiling. Now, President Reagan has restored the former importation allotments because he says he's a free trade person. For example, the farm lobby is killing us. Do you realize that the president tried to get price supports either removed or scaled down on many commodities, and the Senate wouldn't do it. That great Jesse Helms, you know?
Sure.
Jesse Helms, who is not going to turn his back on those farmers. No further comment. I want to talk about an election that will be coming up a year hence. And I must tell you, I do not understand the man whom Jimmy Breslin calls Society Carey. I do not understand him. Apparently, he has gone through life insulting people, making snide, sarcastic, hurting remarks, denouncing people, and then later saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it." And apparently all his life, everybody's forgotten it, forgiven him, because he's still doing it now as a 62-year-old orange-haired adult, fourth husband of NJ Galetis, and he's getting away with it, apparently. A few weeks ago, I thought there was no way that Mario, I'll do anything you really want, Hugh Cuomo, would ever forgive the governor. And I find it hard to respect him if time and time again the governor, shall we say, expectorates in his face, and then a little while later, it's all forgotten. The lieutenant governor just wipes his face and says, "Gee, you missed this spot right here. Next time right here, Hugh." But one of the most contemptuous statements ever made about Mario Cuomo by the governor a couple of weeks ago. A couple of weeks ago, he said he wasn't going to support Eddie Koch or any other candidate for mayor because, quote, I don't dabble in city politics. Now, yesterday he came out and endorsed the mayor.
Later into about that Springbok incident, and I want to tell you what I forgot to tell him because it's very important about Kerry. You see, Governor Kerry has played politics with this. He knuckled under to black groups that are putting up this protest. He has nothing to lose because the groups that oppose, to support them are apathetic. And meanwhile, he's afraid of losing a very black and liberal vote if he runs for governor again. Of course, it's strictly political. He's trying to subvert the Constitution just to get political gain out of it.
This is Bob Grad on WMCA. Get Kaddafi. See what Liz Holtzman does in that office. Now, some of you purists might say, hey, wait a minute. The election isn't until November. And that's true. But in New York, with this obscenely lopsided Democratic edge, why, winning the primary is, with rare exception, tantamount to winning the election. But Ms. Holtzman will face Norman Rosen, who's a very fine man, by the way. She will face him in the general election November 3rd because he has the Republican line. He will be running on the Republican line. But that apparently is academic, and I say it's unfortunate because I like the two-party system to be alive and well, not just in the nation, but in the city as well. Of some other things, for example, the fact that the subways are worse than ever in every conceivable way. Not only do they look worse than ever, they smell worse than ever, they are more dangerous than ever, not only from the predators, from the beasts that maraud, but also from the electrical wiring, etc. They have a deadline. I mean, if the man can't abide by the deadline 4 times in a row, how could we have expected him to handle the very demanding job of controller of the city of New York?
Well, that's. I mean, you're saying that something because he might have had reasons. He might have had personal reasons. I mean, I really.
Well, I'll tell you, pal. I'm not going to belabor the point.
Okay.
The fact is that once that was revealed, his campaign folded like a cheap camera.
Well, look, I'm going to make it regardless.
And you're saying that no matter what, he was doomed because he's not Jewish.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Uh-huh. You calling from the Bronx?
No, I'm calling from Brooklyn.
Uh-huh. You know, Stanley Friedman, I didn't know Stanley Friedman was Irish. Thank you very much. And by the way, the next time you come in, Will you manage to take care of the windows inside and out as well? Do something, for heaven's sake, because you certainly don't make sense. Thanks, pal. Well, the first question from one of the reporters was, Governor Kerry, is it true that you blame the press for some of the problems you've had in the campaign? And the governor said, and I have it on tape, he said, oh, he says, I love the press. I love all of the press. I even love Bob Grant. And everybody couldn't get over that because nobody even mentioned me. And at the time, I thought, well, why in the heck would the governor of the state, the great Empire State, in the midst of a campaign, when he's being questioned by some very serious newsmen, think of telling them that he loved some talk show host that nobody even heard of? Now, can you figure that?
Well, what does it mean to you, that he listens to you?
Well, I'll tell you what it means to me. It means to me that he was worried about some of my editorial comments because I kept reminding people that he said that he would veto the death penalty bill and that if the legislature overrode the bill, he would commute all death sentences. And to me, that indicates a person who doesn't believe in democratic government, because the will of the people was expressed, and he said, "The heck with the will of the people."
And he got in anyway. So
well, you know why he got in? Because he ran against the most ashangada candidate the Republicans could possibly have put up. Did you want to say anything else? Elections are very rarely won; they're usually lost. Think about it.
Where the article in today's Post about the young hoodlum with the multiple arrests?
The one-man crime wave, I think they call it.
Right.
15% of subway felonies committed by this guy.
All subway felonies.
Yeah.
From the ages from 9 to 18 was arrested 50 times. Between the ages of 18 to 22, when he was arrested yesterday, he's been arrested 150 times.
Yeah, that's
averages out to one arrest every 10 days for the last 4 years.
And the question is, why does he keep getting out? After they arrest him, why do they keep letting him out? Why don't they put him up against the wall and shoot him?
He's been arrested for attempted murder to grand larceny.
Yeah. One of these days he will murder somebody, you know that.
Right, and you know that Sanford Garlick, when he was the police chief of the transit police, said that when he was in custody, purse snatches on the subways occurred 2 to 3 times a month. When he was free, the number jumped to 49 a month.
Yeah.
Now, that's unbelievable.
The president pointed out, he also pointed out that when Social Security was first enacted, we paid with the employer and employee combined a maximum of 2% for $3,000. And now it's going to go over 14% on $29,000. But he also pointed out, and I think this is the real grabber, that when Social Security first started, for every recipient there were a little over 16 workers.
Yes.
Now there's just about 3 workers for every recipient. So you say, oh, I knew he cared about the old people. Well, where are the politicians who care enough about the old people to save Social Security? Save it! Thank you.
And, you know, from the new budget cuts from the president, all these seniors are feeling, they're suffering from it.
Well, what are you talking about? They're not publicly funded. You're on WMCA. Hello. Only a Gavone would just say what you said. Only a Gavone. You got to be a Gavone to talk to.
I'm a Gavone, but
You are a Gavone, so give me whatever you wanted to give them. I'll take
what I
it.
wanted to do, my son was mugged in a subway and killed.
Oh.
So we don't need it now.
Oh.
Yeah. But,
Oh, dear me.
we're in New York City, right?
Yeah, how long ago did this happen?
It happened last year when he was mugged. Yeah.
Last year.
Yeah. And he was a handicapped child.
Yeah.
That's why he had the SSI. And
Well-
they pick on a handicapped child to mug.
How old was he, dear?
26.
Dear, what can I say to you? What can I say, huh?
There is nothing.
I've had a relationship, too, was the disclosure by Robert Caro that Lyndon Johnson was taking bribes while he was vice president and apparently continued to conduct some business that he shouldn't have while he was president of the United States.
I enjoy listening to you. I've been home for the past 9 months. I just had a new child, and I look forward to listening to you every day.
I heard her.
It is a shame.
See, I can tell. I got the vibes.
That's right.
Sandra Day O'Connor's place is officially on the Supreme Court. And with all that talk, Jimmy, I'll never lie to you, mate, about women's rights. It was Ron who appointed a woman. I think the American people would, the majority of them would, except there are too many demagogues out there who are assaulting their ears with a lot of garbage. And after all, the poor average schlub can't stand up day in and day out to all those phony baloney statements made by self-serving creeps.
I'm afraid I agree with you. I don't know whether they can do it or not. I just hope they can. I'm there.
I have to laugh at the people, like even the great mayor of the city of New York, the great Eddie Koch. Even he, in the last couple of days, now that he's got the coronation behind him, now suddenly he's sounding like so many of them, saying, yes, I believe we should balance the budget. I believe we should make these cuts, but it's not the right priority. Well, okay, Eddie, what is the right priority then? You tell us.
Getting elected.
At 4, well, the guy wants me to stay on the air. I will, unless I meet somebody with Obalige. Obalige. Anybody got Obalige? Hello?
O'Neill, he really annoys me. In the fact, I think we have a Tip O'Neill's comment when Ronald Reagan came to Washington, and he told him that he was in the big leagues now. Well, if Tip O'Neill is representative of a big leaguer, I think they ought to make him a free agent and send him back to the minors.
The issue also is, where is it written, for heaven's sake, that these entitlement programs are etched in stone and have to go on and on and on?
You're right.
I mean, the American tax-paying schlub has been paying for these entitlement programs for years and years. We're talking about a budget now that has gone up to $600 billion. It was just a few short years ago that when it hit $100 billion, everybody nearly died.
Right. If this country doesn't do what he wants them to do, it'll probably go the same way as England, which is the ultimate welfare state.
Oh, well, we're headed that way. Look, I haven't... somebody asked me after President Reagan took office, they said, do you still predict that we're not going to have this nation as we know it by the year 2000? And I said, yes, I do. And he said, well, I thought you approved of President Reagan's programs. I said, yes, I do. I said, but they won't really be put in place the way they should. And as a matter of fact, I said it on this program months ago. I said the people that should aren't really going to give it a chance.
Can't the people dictate to Congress and Tip O'Neill?
Well, I'll tell you, already they're waging the 1982 congressional campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Already. And that's all Tip O'Neill. It's my firm belief that all Tip O'Neill is thinking about night and day and night is what's going to happen in November of 1982.
Yes, and did you hear that Ted Kennedy's speech yesterday where he was condemning the president's speech before he'd even heard it?
How interesting that two individuals who are part of the problem dare to criticize the man that's come along with the solution.
I couldn't agree more. And
I don't think he's going to be successful because the American people have become so spoiled, so soft, and to begin with are so dumb that they won't be able to really say, hey, wait a minute, we got to take this medicine, we got to, so what is the alternative? I ask.
Do you know,
the reason stated for the collapse of the London stock market, I say collapse, the severe downturn in markets in Sydney, in London, in Paris, etc., was the fact that a guy by the name of Joe Granville, who sends out a newsletter for which he gets about $1,000 each, said it was going to collapse on Monday. So people being nerds at heart, they said, oh, he said it's going to collapse, and we better make it collapse. We'll sell. See that I never cease to be amazed and sickened at the if I were to spend the time allotted to me on the air just telling you of the crazy things that happen in any 24-hour period, we couldn't do it. Just no way. So we have to zero in on some news items from time to time that illustrate the point. I'd like to know, now that the Springboks rugby team has gone back to South Africa, I'd like to know what was accomplished by the skunks at Kennedy Airport. These individuals, I suspect they belong to the Socialist Workers' Party. I don't know for sure, but I suspect they do. Thought the Springboks team would be leaving from Kennedy Airport, and so they went there to demonstrate. I don't know why, but they went there to demonstrate. Now, the Springboks rugby players never hurt anybody. But that's beside the point. The point is that a New York City policeman, Evan Goodstein, 35 years old, of Medford, Long Island, was blinded by 4 women and 1 man who threw acid. And reporters who tried to approach them were escorted out. The 32-member racially mixed team, I want to point out, the Springboks was a racially mixed team, and officials, many of them somber, held an informal last night dinner in the private dining room on the top floor of the hotel, and they left. But I think these 5 skunks should be prosecuted with every possible weapon the law allows. Their photos are in the newspaper, and you can see them. And I swear, by all that's holy, if I had a machine gun, I know what I would do. Now, we're not supposed to say such things. Think them, but don't say them.
Barry Farber pointed out that where all these people from the Soviet hockey team came out. Not that they...
To find out who Timothy Blunk, Donna Borup, Margotta Pelletier...
Eva Roseanne and Mary Patton are.
Yeah, I want to find out who they are. I want to find out if they're members of the Socialist Workers' Party or what organization they belong to, because I can't believe that any normal individual American woman, or man for that matter, would engage in such idiotic activities and would blind a police officer who, even if the Springboks were evil, which they are not, but even if they were, had nothing to do with it. I mean, Evan Goodstein had nothing to do with that, so they blinded him.
He was doing his job.
Well, I'd like to get a hold of them. We probably still would have a death penalty on the books and in use if we didn't use archaic, klutzy, revolting, emotion-grabbing things like the gas chamber or the electric chair. It has been my contention that had we used a hypodermic needle with some, perhaps an overdose of sodium pentothal, or thiopental sodium, or pancuronium bromide, potassium chloride, any one of those, which gives a person a feeling of euphoria. You kind of feel as though you're on a high. And if you've just been injected, someone could come in and say, we're going to cut off your arm. Do you mind? And you say, no, I don't mind. And 2 seconds later, you'd be dead. The important thing is, if you're a murderer, you should be dead. That's the only way murderers don't kill again, by being dead themselves. There is now talk. You're busy. You're probably listening with one ear, and with the other, you're listening to the nurse say, doctor, his blood pressure seems to be... Oh, there's no pulse. Doctor, is that the way they do it on General Hospital? No, here's how they do it on General Hospital, like this. Come here, you. Oh, doctor. There, I finally got that sliver out of my thumb. All right. I'm WMCA. We're with you. Hello. Uh-huh. And that kicks things in the head for the day. No, I'm just kidding. Your people, sir.
I mean, my people, my...
No, I really don't know what you mean. I wish you'd identify what you mean when you...
Well, I'm really, this is my first time calling and stuff, and I'm kind of nervous, but, bear with me. Mostly like my people, like...
No, you keep using the phrase, and I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
Well, what I'm trying to say, people that live in low-class neighborhoods, like, Bethesda...
No, they don't execute people who live in low-class neighborhoods. They don't execute anybody. They should execute murderers, though. And most of the people who live in low-class neighborhoods are not murderers. So your people are not people who live in low-class neighborhoods.
Well, I
As a matter of fact, I don't even think you're what you say you are.
I am.
No, I don't think so. I don't... You identify yourself as black. I really don't even think you're black.
Well, sir, I'll be glad to give you my name.
You don't sound as though you're legit. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's the way you come across to me. No, you don't sound legit when you keep saying my people. What are you, a ruler or something? Are you a potentate somewhere? Are you a king? You a prince?
No, I'm not.
Uh-huh. Well, I get leery about terms like my people.
Healthy specimen. Why not drain his blood? And in that way, he may save a life in exchange for the one that he took.
Well, in that case, we'll just get Dracula and have him do the job for us.
No, Dracula would use the blood for himself. But I mean this as a humanitarian way.
I see. All right, sir. You've just revolted me no end. I thank you.
Where the cycle gets more vicious on page 18. And it shows one welfare mother with 4 kids. And she claims that she doesn't know how she's going to manage with less. And here she used to go to secretarial school. We used to pay for it. She doesn't know how she's going to do it now. And all this business, I think, and she also asked that Reagan should take care of things at home before he spends on bombs, as if she's an authority.
Well, that would be the most humane thing to do. It would be the most humane thing to do for Joyce, since Joyce obviously doesn't know what makes babies. And it would be the most humane thing for the tax-paying schlub who has to support Joyce and her brood. But every sow has to have a brood, no?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And where's the father? I'd ask that.
Well, let's see. Maybe, it just might be that each offspring has a different father. Just to create a novel family.
It would be humorous if it wasn't so pathetic, Bob.
You know what's pathetic? What's pathetic is the bleeding heart skunks. Right. The bleeding heart skunks that got us in this mess attack those of us who want to get us out of it as though we're doing something wrong.
Exactly.
They're trying to harpoon the president's program, which is the only way to salvation. But I look at that particular family, and as I recall, the eldest of this 28-year-old lady's youngster is 11. Now, when I first
12.
12.
Right.
I thought, all right, 12. I think then the second one is 11.
Right.
Okay. When I first proposed, the Bob Grant Mandatory Sterilization Act of 1970 has been passed, we only would have had the 12-year-old to contend with. You know?
Very true.
It'd be a lot easier to just take care of him than the other 3, who I understand are very hungry. I love that lady running, the Congresswoman Marge Holt in Maryland. Love her. Because she was picketed by a bunch of the screamers, and picketed because they were going to cut out the food stamps, or not cut them out, but cut down the food stamps, cut out a lot of the lunch programs. And she said, my heavens, they're all so overweight, maybe it would do them a favor if they would eat less. Now, no man would have the guts to say that. What a strange society we live in, where the men get punier and the women get tougher. Give me a tough woman. All right, come days of execution.
So
last minute.
Prisoners sent to hard labor then?
Well,
they're not going to be exterminated.
Well, I think they should be, but of course then you have the ACLU and all the bleeding hearts say it's inhumane. It's okay that the guy killed somebody. That's all right. That was not inhumane. But how you treat him is of grave concern, right?
Sending out from the United States alone on the order of more than $90 billion a year.
You know, Frank, you called last week, and although you were talking about a different subject, you were as bizarre then as you are today. And Frank, life is too short, and I have too much respect for this medium to indulge you with this lunacy.
I think I can make a legitimate point. It's not hard to understand. The fact is that we are sending away within a year.
Oh, good heavens.
And
Frank, what do you do for a living?
I'm
I beg your pardon?
Construction inspector.
I beg your pardon?
I'm a construction inspector.
Are you one of those guys? You said you're from the Bronx. Are you one of those 11 guys that took payoffs?
Not recently. It's got to be really heavy, you know.
Yeah. So long, Frank. So long, Frank. I want to get back to the real world. Thank you for this interlude of fantasy, okay? Thanks, Frank. Bizarre. 300 fanatical supporters of Iran's Ayatollah Khamenei staged a bloody rampage through Midtown yesterday. These were supporters of the Ayatollah. Now, what the heck they're doing in this country is beyond me. They smashed into lunchtime strollers. They injured 8 cops. And last night, a wave of outrage from politicians to the man in the street swept New York, demanding that the demonstrators be thrown out of the country. Yesterday's violence was the climax of a series of ugly clashes staged in the United States cities by Iranian fanatics. And by the way, these fanatics, I want to point out to you, were admitted to this country on student visas. How many are really students? Probably none. But that's beside the point, whether they would be or not. I think after what happened to the United States, after the holding of our hostages for 444 days, or have you forgotten? It is obscene that we would allow these sworn enemies of our country, these kidnappers of our fellow Americans, it's obscene that we allow them to continue living in this great land of ours. But you talk about the chutzpah award, not only do they live here, they have the temerity to go out and demonstrate. Can you imagine if a group of Americans tried to demonstrate in Tehran? They would be mowed down by machine guns, and their bodies would be piled up like cordwood. Photos would be taken, and they would say, "Don't you dare do that again." I think it's a travesty. I'm just sick about the whole thing. Apparently, the violence broke out when a middle-aged woman, an American, angered by their behavior, pulled at an Iranian flag. And a bunch of these young thugs jumped on her, enraging a group of onlookers. And I understand that men in business suits carrying briefcases jumped on the Iranian students. Well, good for them. And then other women, office workers, even junkies from Bryant Park, and American students joined in the melee. And friends of mine on the New York Police Department told me that bottles, rocks, apples, anything that New Yorkers could get their hands on were hurled at the Iranians as a nervous squad of police officers moved both mobs east on 46th Street towards the United Nations. Apparently, when the police moved in to control the sprawling marchers, one of them knocked an officer to the ground. And you know what? After they knocked that officer to the ground, others swarmed all over him. And an old woman was knocked down, and the cops and the students clashed in front of the middle of the street. And despite the protective shield, the Iranian mob continued to attack the cops. Several women were beaten as the students clashed with police and bystanders. They say it was a circus-like atmosphere near the UN, heightened when emergency medical service paramedics arrived at the scene and pleaded with the student leaders that some of the critically wounded Iranians needed medical treatment. Or why did they give him the medical treatment, huh? Believe it or not, here's a phone call. WMCA, hello.
Hello?
Yeah, I know. I'm not proud of my country that we allow this. I really am not. I can't take the view that maybe some sanctimonious soul might take where he says, isn't it great that no matter what they did to us, we allow these Iranians to continue to desecrate this country. I think it's a disgrace. I think only a weak country without any conviction would allow these Iranian bums to continue. I think they should be deported immediately. And well, after all that fuss, South Africa's Springboks rugby team left quietly for home last night under tight police protection. Evan Goodstein's eyesight apparently is gone. He's a 35-year-old police officer who's just doing his job at Kennedy Airport. 4 women and 1 man threw acid in his face because they didn't like the Springboks. And the book ought to be thrown at them. It seems ahead for tonight for those of you who didn't make it in. Hope we get a chance to talk tomorrow. Stay tuned for Mystery Theater. Until then, Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Kaddafi.
The crime, you're going to have to pay a punishment for that. Society has always said that.
Yeah.
And Bob, what's happened in the demoralization of our criminal justice system has occurred as a result of a lot of technicalities where we put the exclusionary rule, for example, as a pedestal for which prosecutors and police officers have got to leap that pedestal before we can get to the search of truth. In other words, they're saying, the courts have said in this country for too long, that police officers have got to be lawyers. And if you fail to have an affidavit for a search warrant signed, even though you previously have sworn to a magistrate or to a judge that you're telling the truth, if you fail to sign your name to it, or to dot the I, or to date it, or if you misspelled a word, then the search goes out the window and the criminal is allowed to go free. And that's...
I think we ought to underscore that, because there are many people listening who have a pretty good idea of what you're talking about, but maybe don't really grasp the horrendous significance of it all. What you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, District Attorney David Armstrong on WS, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, from his office in Louisville, Kentucky, where he... Hey, Armstrong, what you're saying then is police officers, authorities, may get evidence. The evidence is solid. The evidence only adds to the believability of guilt. But because in getting that evidence, some technicality, quote unquote, may have occurred, that evidence is not allowed in court. And because that evidence is not allowed in court, the defendant beats the case. I am grateful, because I wouldn't think that a Bob Dylan fan was also a Bob Grant fan.
You have a lot in common, you two. You both are social commentators, and you both have an astute vision of the future, and he just puts it into music. You just keep it in prose.
Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Kaddafi.
The organization made his remarks. This is utterly disgusting, because when an individual dies, you show some respect.
Well, that was Noble, and I don't know Mr. Noble, or Nakle, and I must tell you that I felt that it was totally out of line myself. Nevertheless, I think we're very naive if we're going to be shocked over that, because we've got to remember that Anwar Sadat incurred tremendous animosity from virtually the entire Arab world when he went to Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, outside of his own Egypt, there wasn't an Arab leader to be found who lauded what he did. They Dr. Mehdi many times. As a matter of fact, I kicked Dr. Mehdi out of this very studio back in 1974. He is scheduled to appear with me, Dr. M.T. Mehdi, at 5 o'clock. He's the president of the American Arab Relations Committee. Now, I will try to be circumspect, and I will try to be very polite and courteous. I hope that he returns the, shall we say, disposition. But for those of you who may wonder about Dr. Mehdi, I'm not going to prejudge him. I'll give him an opportunity to express some rational view on this radio station after the 5 o'clock news.
Extremism invariably misses the boat. Now, Sadat was a politician, was a statement, a great showmanship. He loved Egypt. He wanted the best for Egypt. And he was even willing to sacrifice his brother, the Palestinians, in the interest of Egypt. So that is understandable when it comes as a big show to the American public, the nice people who are accustomed to great things, to enjoy it.
Let me interrupt for just a moment to tell people who you are, because they might be shocked to hear this man seemingly so insensitive that on such a tragic day, with the great man just not even cold in his grave, here you are speaking with not even praise, but actually in a pejorative sense. Dr. Mehdi is a Palestinian, I believe. Where were you born, Doctor?
Baghdad.
In Baghdad?
Yeah.
So
by birth.
By birth.
I'm Berkeleyite by education. Berkeley, California. That's my real love affair. And I say when all the good Muslims face east towards Mecca to say their prayers, I face west towards Berkeley to say my prayers.
Very interesting. I don't know if the Muslim Brotherhood is listening or not, but that they might take a task for that. Dr.
Is to improve American-Arab understanding, to interpret the Arab world to the American people, and interpret America to the people of the Arab world. Our concern is with peace in Palestine, genuine peace, not the sham big show style which was created in Camp David. A little bit more freedom of press in Egypt, a little bit more freedom of speech in Egypt, all of which President Sadat had suppressed. And because he had claimed to be pro-American, he was a good boy, and the American news media did not give extensive coverage to the tyranny of this one man. This is very, very tragic.
Just a moment ago, the great love affair the American media has had with Anwar Sadat, and that's true. There was possibly one dissenter, of all people, William Safire. Have you been reading his columns of late?
Yes, I know Mr. Safire. He is really not my cup of tea. He is, forgive me to say, a little bit even more reactionary than a friend of mine.
Well, he's much more pro-Israeli than you are.
Least to say.
We're going to be joined by Ted Koppel, Barry, and Dr. Mehdi. Barry, this is your first opportunity to speak on the microphone today. I'm sure you were as shocked as the rest of us.
Well, yes, and if this were early in the awareness, I would, of course, stick directly to the obvious imperatives. There are more question marks than exclamation points, and I'm sure, Bob, knowing you and your level of professionalism, that those have all been amply covered. So forgive me, please, if I use my little minute and a half on one frivolity and then one grave point. The frivolity was we've been so... Did you see the television... The NBC people hadn't seen it yet themselves. They got that live satellite feed from Egypt saying whatever you're going to see is what the Egyptian television camera crew took. We don't even think it's been on Egyptian TV for obvious reasons, but whatever it is, here it comes. Did you see that?
No, Barry, we were broadcasting here.
Exactly. Wow.
Speaking of what people will see on television, Ted Koppel is with us. Ted, who is no stranger to WMCA audiences. Thank you for being with us, Ted.
Thank you, Bob. It's always nice to be with you.
The chief punctuations, and I wonder if this occurred to Ted Koppel, who I've never met but always admired. As someone who's been conditioned to violence on American television, even though this was obviously a palpitating tragedy, at least to me, I wish America well, I wish Israel well, etc. As a television viewer, you want to strangle the camera. Come on. Every crime show is cleaner than this. Every war show is cleaner right place, having been conditioned on a lifetime of violence on TV, the real thing just looked like it was completely wrong.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I also know that you don't mean it the way you're saying it. You obviously understand why the cameraman isn't standing still. I mean, as you could see on that video, the attack was still underway. I mean, the soldiers were quite clear, still firing.
Exactly, but there was a stupid little boy deep down in me that said, "Come on, you call this a well-directed battle scene?"
Yeah, exactly. That's just one of the tragedies, because what also happens, and if you're talking about the same piece of video that I saw, there is one scene where one of Sadat's associates is kind of lying there with this almost bemused expression on his face, and only the stump of his right arm is still showing.
Ted, I meant to ask you, I couldn't see that. Was that arm as mangled as it looked, or was it just blood coming through?
No, I mean, it was blown off at the elbow. It really was, and, you know, you look at that, and then, of course, you have to say to yourself, yeah, now I know it's for real. It's not just that the camera isn't standing still. It's not just that I'm not seeing this as clearly as I'm accustomed to seeing it on cops and robbers shows. This is reality, and reality is really sickening.
Will you be showing some of the footage that Barry discussed?
Yes, some of it will be shown, and I've got to tell you, at a point like this, I don't know whether we should or should not show the particular scene that I was just talking about.
I think you should.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are good arguments to be made on both sides, and the most compelling argument is that the sickening nature of reality deserves to be seen. We have become all too accustomed and feel ourselves altogether too comfortable with the kind of sanitized violence that Hollywood provides. This sort of thing is reality, and it really is not pretty.
An open forum, but for our first hour today, we will have an open forum. I remember on Yom Kippur of 1973, however, on that year, Yom Kippur fell on October 6th, not October 8th. I remember being on the air right here at WMCA. I was on earlier in the day then, broadcast from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. And, of course, the Arab attack on Israel occurred. And I'd never forget that, because it was one virulent anti-Semitic call after another. And since people of the Jewish faith could not call, since they were virtually all in shul, it fell upon me to get the brunt of these horrible anti-Semitic outpourings that dripped with virulent hatred.
And my question is this: how was it that you were a prophet, either knowingly or unknowingly, so many years ago, before anybody in the media recognized what we're dealing with your phrase, "get Gaddafi"? You base it on back then, way back then.
All right, Phil, the answer to that is a very simple answer. It was in September of 1971 that I made a trip to Israel and got to know, in that relatively short time I was there, a man by the name of Major Albert Maya. And we spent many a day and many a night.
Who was he?
He was a major in the Israeli army, in the Israeli intelligence division.
Mm-hmm.
And he had just retired prior to September 1971 when I went there. I spent a great deal of time with him, and he told me one night, he said, "You know, I'm going to tell you something because I think you have a grasp of the world situation and you won't laugh." And then he proceeded to tell me that Kaddafi was plotting to cause all sorts of trouble, that Kaddafi was behind the PLO. And he told me a story I've not been able to confirm, but he told me that Israel had an assassination team ready and training to knock off Gaddafi. And that Golda Meir had ordered the program, they had a code name, canceled, because she felt that although they would have succeeded, it might have caused more problems than it was worth. And when I came back from Israel, toward the end of September that year, for the first time, I concluded my program by saying, get Gaddafi. And I have said that ever since, except for some brief periods when, for one reason or another, I stopped. I think that had Sadat lived, he was going to move against Gaddafi. I really believe that. What is to be done now? If this were the days of Teddy Roosevelt, we wouldn't waste any time. We'd go right into Tripoli, and that would be the end of Gaddafi. Yeah, it's, what is this, 1980? Well, it's 10 years I've been saying get Gaddafi. Maybe, and someday they will.
Hello, Bob, this is Bob. I disagree with you about Anwar Sadat's greatness. It seems that only lifelong enemies of the Arab people, such as Mayor Koch and Mr. Pollock, who you had on yesterday, and other Zionists, were saddened by the assassination.
Well, let me tell you this about Zionists. Anybody who believes that Israel has a right to exist is a Zionist. So that would make, let's see, there are 230 million people in this country. Outside of you and a very small handful of virulent haters, will minus whatever. You're going to have a meeting in a telephone booth, I know, with your group a little later. So we'll minus you. But we'll say almost 230 million people would qualify. Little Johnny, one note, bum, 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 bum. That guy never gets tired, you know?
Mr. Graham.
I have been saying, get Gaddafi. I've been saying that because it has been my belief that he has been behind most of the troubles in most parts of the world. I remember when I was in Italy in 1972, in September of that year, you may know what happened in Munich. 11 Israeli athletes and their trainers were killed by Palestinian guerrillas who were funded, inspired, directed by Muammar Gaddafi. How incredible that it's taken this long for people to start understanding who this person is and what he's about. The headline on one of our New York newspapers says, Reagan tops Libya hit list. Gaddafi has targeted him for murder. And who is the author of this piece? Is written by no less a person than the widely read Jack Anderson. Sorry that Colonel Maya and his aborted hit team did not get Gaddafi way back when. But there's no doubt in anybody's mind now that I wasn't just saying get Gaddafi because it sounded dramatic. Only one thing wrong. He hasn't been gotten yet. So what are you worried about? Hey, your rabbi can't possibly listen, so if you want to call, you can. Disguise your voice. Close the schools on Yom Kippur. Why not the radio stations? Going to get him is going to be a Libyan himself.
Right, okay, well...
Because an Israeli couldn't get anywhere near him now. When they had the chance... Is this Phil?
No, my name is Ralph.
Oh, because it sounds so much like Phil.
Oh, right.
When the Israelis had the chance, and Golda Meir called it off, that was when they blew it, in my opinion. Because they had at least 3 teams, according to Albert Maya, they had 3 teams training for knocking Gaddafi off. And they were using Yemenite Jews who look indistinguishable from, say, Libyans, for example. I just do not accept the bland statement that it was a few fanatics who pulled this off. I think the cadre of individuals responsible for this has a wider circle.
States against the communists. Invariably, the leaders are either assassinated or overthrown.
Yes, I have, Frank.
You know, is it that the United States doesn't give its support, or is it because the Soviet Union is so well organized in its methods of disruptions? You know, if it was religious fanatics that pulled the trigger on Anwar al-Sadat, then it's obvious that the bloodstained hand of the Soviet Union held the gun, and their lackey down in Libya, Kaddafi, supplied the bullets. And, you know, it's funny, in the press, prior to Sadat's assassination, they were doing the same thing to him that they had done to the Shah. That is that Sadat had to crack down on these lunatics, and that they started comparing Sadat to the Shah. Remember how when the Shah was putting these nut jobs in prison?
Yep.
And right away they made him out to be a dictator. But given the situation in Iran after they've taken over, one can only realize what the Shah, as well as Sadat, was up against.
Well, that's true. And Frank, you seem to have a grasp on the modus operandi of the communists, the way they have worked for years and years in fomenting the troubles and creating a situation whereby a ruler has no choice but to crack down. Once he cracks down, they say, you see, he's a despot. I recall when these Muslim fanatics in just outside of Tehran set fire to a motion picture theater in 1978. And it was early in that year, and the fanatics had been caught. 348 innocent people died in that fire. And these fanatics said that they set fire to the place because they were watching decadent Western movies. Well, at that time, the Shah cracked down. He had these people arrested. They were summarily executed, and he was labeled all over as a true tyrant because look what he did. He was rounding up these zealots. And you're right, Frank. It's the same routine. What saddens me, depresses me, and is the only thing that really makes me worry about the future of this country is somewhere along the line, if we don't break this chain, they will go all the way. And, people say, oh, he's seeing communists again. Oh, No, I'm not seeing communists under any beds here in this country at this time. But I do recognize the fact that there is an orchestration that comes from somewhere. Well, and if it doesn't come from Moscow, I'd like to know where else it comes from.
Well, I think it's aided and abetted in this country, Bob, by the press that gives a one-sided view, because wherever these so-called despots were overthrown, look at the wholesale genocide that has been replaced in those countries by the communists or these lunatics in Iran. And then we have to think, what are these governments that are right-wing dictatorships that we're telling them, well, you have to acquiesce on certain terms to the communists to come to agreements. What are they saying now when they see what happens to those who follow the advice of the United States and are assassinated or overthrown? And why doesn't the press constantly and continually barrage us with what's going on with the genocide in these governments that have been deposed now that the communists have been taken over? It's a very frightening situation when we realize that one by one our allies are being replaced.
Frank, I thank you for your call.
Thank you, Bob.
You had a chance. Would you get him?
Well, what do you mean by if I had a chance?
If you were standing in front of the man and you were armed, would you shoot Gaddafi?
Well, if I had a chance to get him, I probably would, for the simple reason that I think it would save many, many innocent lives. But I've never killed anyone. I'm not a commando. I've never fired at a human being, and I think you're rather absurd by saying you wouldn't let your men do any job that you would do, and using that noble cliche to apply to me. But then again, there's all kinds out there. We did have the clandestine operations of the CIA, as you may have recalled, aftermath of Watergate, with this widespread misplaced guilt and this throwing the baby out with the bath syndrome. We did away with that. And that kicks things in the head for tonight. Until tomorrow, Bob Grant reminding you your influence counts. Use it. Get Kaddafi.
I think you couldn't be more wrong when it comes to...
By the way, Phil, I'm sorry that you said I think you couldn't be more wrong, because people are going to say, oh, that's why he's hanging up on Phil. Phil, you're violating the 7-day rule. We have a 7-day rule, folks. And Phil was on, this is Friday, Phil was on Wednesday. On, everyone, in Master Control. Those in the immediate control room, And anyone within a radius of 150 yards of Studio D, prepare now for an obviously shocking disclosure. And by the way, I feel it incumbent upon me to advise those of you who may suspect you have cardiovascular problems to forego this program if you can stand the deprivation for the next minute. If there are youngsters, particularly below the median age of 15, send those youngsters out to play tiddlywinks. If Rollo is in the vicinity of your radio, Mom, please tell Rollo to go to the Becaus and let the water run. Not the hot water, you don't want to waste that stuff, but let some cold water run. Let him flush, you know what, to make noise. I do not want Rollo to hear what is obviously going to come as a tremendous shock to the great tri-state area. Now that I have what's left of you, potentially 20 million people, I must tell you in all candor, ladies and gentlemen, we are taking telephone calls. Yes, this is one of those telephone talk programs. And yes, I am a talk show host, for want of a better title. And yes, you can dial. And yes, not only will I hear you, but even that nasty lady across the way, who never dreamed how smart you really were. Even that crotchety old guy down the block, who has no idea you are so blessed with wisdom. And yes, even that young, debonair fellow who never gave you a tumble because he thought you were all facade and had nothing upstairs. And, by the way, this telephone talk program transcends political boundaries. Ladies and gentlemen, through the miracles of modern radio and modern telephone, Don Amici's approval, of course, notwithstanding, you can actually call from the Garden State of New Jersey. Now, I know you're busy in New Jersey. I know there are many things to do. There's paint to watch drying. There's green grass to watch turn brown. But if you want to break up those scintillating pastimes, you can use 624-6855.
Takes your word for all of these. Not even a signature is required. When the hell did they put this across?
Well, it's been across for quite some time, since the 1960s that I know of. And as a person who came here 11 years ago from another state, I can tell you it was very simple for me to register and participate in the 1970 elections. And nobody asked me to prove anything.
So if I were an Iranian student, I assume I could vote.
I assume you could. There was a time when we had some sanity in our laws, and you at least had to know the nation of this language, which still happens to be English, by the way.
Well, I don't...
Yeah, there probably will come a time, maybe in the election of 1992, the president will have to take the oath bilingually.
Years ago, and I went to a parent-teachers thing, and they introduced somebody, and they gave a speech, and then they introduced somebody else, and they were the bilingual committee. Now, up there, they apparently have a lot of Haitians, or more than I realized, and then somebody got up and said, I'm from the trilingual committee. So I left.
The trilingual committee.
Trilingual committee.
George Orwell would love that. What?
I think, what I think right now, and I read this in an article about a week ago, in terms of his economic package, is point to probably his greatest economic feat today, and that has been his deregulation of crude oil, January 27th, which you never really get a chance to see in the New York Times and other publications. Since that happened, that he deregulated crude oil, production is up, imports are down about 20%, and contrary to so many negative points of view that because he deregulated crude oil, the price would skyrocket. I remember back in February, people were saying by the end of the summer, the gallon of gas is going to be $2 each. And contrary to all the negative predictions, the greatest feat is that it's worked working in terms of the incentive. The price is stabilized, production is up. OPEC is now, backing down in terms of trying to raise their prices because they know there's more incentive here for the American companies to, make their own oil. Yeah. And I think, you really never see that. I read that in a few publications that you don't really get a chance to see on a general level.
Well, Anthony, your call is interesting for a variety of reasons. To me, not the least of which is the juxtaposition to the call just ahead of yours, which was very strange. The woman apparently was suspicious that maybe the Concorde was doing something that she didn't know about. And, of course, here's somebody who said she relies on my judgment and yet was surprised that I had such a lovely mother, which, if it were truly important, I would have spent time asking her why she was so surprised. But anyway, be that as it may, what I'm driving at is if there is no problem, usually the best way you know there's no problem is you don't hear a word. You understand?
Yes, no.
The doomsayers, the chicken littles who said that if the Concorde were allowed to land at JFK, that life on virtually all of Long Island would be absolutely worthless. Where are they now? They're in the same homes they lived in before. They drive the same cars. They go to the same places, and they don't even know when a Concorde is landing or taking off. And we're saying that the sky was going to fall because of deregulations. Matter of fact, a guy I happen to admire a great deal, Scoop Jackson, said by fall it would be $2 a gallon. Well, this is fall, isn't it? Yeah.
But that only goes to show, if I can quote Confucius, in your view, is that those that know the truth really aren't equal to those that love it. And in this case, when you talk about the mass of people like the demonstrators at the Concorde or the people that always negative mass programs, especially since Ronald Reagan's in office, the mass is just so sheep-like, like all philosophers have always contended.
Well, most of those people that have no nukes on their battered Volkswagens and who have beards down to their ankles and hair down to the other side of their ankles, those people don't vote. For the most part, thank God.
Having him box from Railway Prison, they ought to have him live from getting the electric chair on a Saturday afternoon.
Well, yes, as a matter of fact, that'd be great since he is a convicted murderer.
Right. He has no business being able to box since I think it's a triple murder, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's really a travesty of justice that killers aren't sentenced to death, number one. But then it's like rubbing salt in the wounds of society that they allow this travesty to be televised far and wide, and he's lionized as some kind of a hero.
Right. How about the guy that shot the Pope? He's already doing his life sentence.
And you'll never see him in a boxing match or in a chess match or in anything.
In solitary.
No, that's right.
His first year is going to be in solitary. And the guy that shot the President Reagan hasn't even been put in jail yet.
And he'll probably beat the rap because that maybe he's not all there.
I hope if they do build more prisons, which we do need, evidently, that they don't make country clubs out of them.
You mean more country clubs?
Right, more country clubs. They should build.
And until Monday, this is Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Kaddafi. We let him. Hey, listen, it's an insane world. When Gloria Steinem gets on the Phil Donahue show and says, quote, "We have become the husbands we wanted to marry." Would you tell me what sense that makes? If a guy said, "We have become..."
So that you can then run these boards and make sure that there are 2 women, 2 blacks, and Hispanics, and have the meetings conducted bilingually. I mean, I really think your interest is purely selfish and not at all to the benefit of the people you claim it to be.
One question. I'll be blunt and reply. That's the real paranoid mindset. Now, let me finish.
You're not paranoid, but I'm paranoid.
Let me finish, ma'am. I'll let you finish. I hear now say I will never serve on the board of directors of a company. I want to assure you the goal is not to get me or my ilk on boards, but just a teeny bit of diversity rather than almost all of them being white males over 60 who are entitled to be on boards. It's a rich country. And I would like to see the people who own corporations, shareholders, nominate and elect people to the board, so there's a little more diversity and openness on that board of directors.
I was amused by your reference to the undemocratic system. Were you comparing it perhaps to the great democracy of the Democratic Convention last year?
In the past decade, maybe in this generation. And you know what that is? The rise of what is called Muslim fundamentalism. Muslim fundamentalism. That's what brought the Ayatollah Khamenei to power. That is what most people believe killed Anwar Sadat. And I have learned that I better be very careful about my predictions, because even if the world does not remember what I say, our gentleman of distinction at the controls, the esteemed William Callahan, does. He confessed to me just prior to airtime that he too laughed along with everybody else when in 1972-73 I talked about Muammar Gaddafi, when I said that we would regard him as perhaps the most dangerous man in the world. And unfortunately, that has come to pass. All right, you're on the air. Hello.
Yeah, Bob, this is Rich.
Yes, Rich.
The Yankees won. How do you like that?
Well, you know how I feel, Rich. I don't like the Yankees, so I don't like that. But there are other important things to worry about, like what will Billy Martin do to the Yankees? Aha! You know, I have to be flattered that the impact I've had on the audience is so considerable that when the Yankees win anything, guys like Rich, instead of enjoying it, instead of saying, my team won, they think about gloating to Bob Grant. Isn't that interesting? I remember I was in London, 1976, and it was the first week of October. A fellow by the name of Chris Chambliss. George Steinbrenner used him, and then after he didn't need him anymore, he got rid of him, hit a home run against the Kansas City Royals. When I got back from London, on my desk there were a stack of clippings, photos, of the newspapers with notes. How do you like this? Ha, ha, ha. There must have been at least 60, 70. To think that the impact of a guy on the radio would be so great that a guy hits a home run and they think about me. I don't know. You're up. That kicks things in the head for tonight. For those of you who didn't make it in, do hope we get a chance to talk tomorrow. Until then, Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Kaddafi. Tell you, if I spent today's 2 hours telling you things I don't like, you would never get a chance to say a thing. I don't like the fact the newspapers are overdoing it with George and Billy already. I mean, I'm enough already. Is it really that important? As I said to my psychiatrist this morning, Doctor, is it really important that I hate the Yankees? The people traumatized by crime constantly. I happen to have met with a couple who were the victims of a crime in which the two assailants held guns to their head, and one was saying, okay, blow him away, and the fellow cocked his gun. He was about to pull the trigger, and an automobile came into the garage, in this parking garage, underground parking garage, and it caused the skunks to not pull the trigger and to dash away. Now, these people did not get shot. $15,000 worth of jewelry taken from her, apparently, jewelry and coat, and the man had about a couple $100. But the thing is, this little item appeared in the paper, and it said, couple miraculously escapes death. But they really didn't escape. Their lives will never be the same. They're walking zombies. They're virtually catatonic. And it occurs to me that, understandably, we dwell on the victims of all these crimes who are murdered, severely wounded, who have lost loved ones. But it goes even deeper than that, even beyond that point. And you see another... Incredible how those gunmen were able to go right up to Sadat. A dentist couldn't have got much closer if he were examining his teeth. Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Kaddafi.
Do you think the Dodgers are going to win tomorrow night?
I must tell you, I'm a pessimistic person usually, but I have the feeling they will. So much going through my system. What were those 3 exciting games on the West Coast that I didn't think I'd recover in time to do today's broadcast. I think George Steinbrenner is one of the most complex individuals to come along in a long while, and we can all play psychiatrist with George. It's something that we can really sink our teeth into. I saw someone on a national television program this morning say that he thought George Steinbrenner needed psychiatric help. Well, here's a man who told Billy Martin he had to fire him for his own good, and the question is, who can fire George Steinbrenner for his own good? Anybody who doesn't know where I stand on many of the issues and how I feel philosophically about where this country is going, anybody who doesn't know is a brand new listener. So if you're there, I welcome you. For those of you who have gotten together with me over the years know how strongly I feel about the direction I think we've been headed. And we're still heading there. I mean, the fact that we have this administration in place is no guarantee that we're going to stop the drift towards a situation which is anarchical, which means anarchy. And the reason I say that is there are far too many people walking the streets who should not be on the loose. I know we had on Barry Gray's program this afternoon someone who was talking about why there's so much crime. Well, listen. You can play sociologist all you want. But the fact of the matter is that if you're going to spend your time analyzing why something happens, you're missing the point. The point is you've got to quell the epidemic. You can't go to these mutations. You can't go to these murderers. You can't go to these people who are destroying society and say, gee, what's bothering you? They have declared war on society. And for whatever reason. Now, you take some of these women, for example, who are in this, the Weather Underground. And there are 2 that come to mind, in addition to Kathy Bodine. But the 2, Judith Clark, and a woman who has given many different names, Nina Lewis. Her real name is Buck, her last name. For whatever reason, they have declared war on America. And the question is, why were they even out on the loose to begin with? One was out on a furlough. She was doing a 7-year sentence, and she was out on a furlough. I don't understand. I would like to know what someone doing time, what right they have being out on a furlough. Even if she didn't go back to her criminal ways and didn't go back to the gang that's trying to destroy this country. I thought that we were supposed to lock these people up to get them off the street. I do not understand. Will someone please explain that? These are the things that outrage me. Pierre, but on the other hand, what about Robert L. Cobb? He's begun serving a 7 to 25-year prison term for killing his common-law wife. I get a load of this. That's the 2nd spouse he has murdered. That's right. In 1971, Cobb was convicted of manslaughter in the beating death of his first wife, Dolores. He was paroled 2 years after 2 years at the Marion Correctional Institution. After 2 years. So, as I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, when they murder once, they murder again and again and again. I tell you, my heart just goes out to the family of those 3 men, Waverly Brown, Mehdi, and Peter Page, whose lives because those mutants were on the loose. You know what? One thing that disturbs me, and I tell my police friends, I say, listen, you guys are supposed to be the professionals. You guys are supposed to be the ones that represent the thin line of defense between society and the lawless. How come so many times You guys are the guys that wind up in the morgue. Are they better shots? Do they use better guns? What is it?
The thing I wanted to talk about with you is the thing, there's a trial going on in Danbury, Connecticut now. You've probably read about it, where this young man murdered somebody, and they have these seers, or I don't know what they call them, people that talk to the other world, who are there to...
yeah, there's supposed to be some kind of a seance involved.
Right. Isn't that unbelievable? I mean, what kind of...
Don't blame the lawyer, because that lawyer is smart enough to know that there are a lot of wacky judges, and there are a lot of jurors who prove that P.T. Barnum was right. You know, and don't forget, as long as we're talking about Americana and folklore heroes, it was H.L. Mencken who said nobody ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American. And, you know, there's a lot of bumpkins out there.
That's why I worry about that might get into office again, because...
Well, there are more governors, senators, congressmen, yes, even sometimes presidents in office, because the Capones have always outnumbered the non-Capones.
Personally got a letter from a Mr. Peter Rodino. I'm proud to be an American with Italian heritage, but I damn sure reject Mr. Rodino sending Italian Americans out a little letter saying, vote for the man with the fig tree in his backyard, Mr. Florio. I'm betting on the people of Italian extraction that they won't bite for that piece of meat that's being held out. Reject it.
Well, Sam, I'm sorry to hear that a man with the alleged prestige of the congressman would write you such a very ethnic-oriented letter. I really am. But let me say this. Only a Capone would vote for a man because he was of the same ethnic background. Only a Capone would use that as the criteria for voting for a guy. 19. That kicks things in the head for today. Until tomorrow, Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Kaddafi. Is how the New York press has been really, I think, so unfair about all of this. Whether they're on the radio or the television, or whether they're writing in the newspapers, I haven't seen anybody really give the Dodgers credit. I mean, there's some...
And they've worked.
It's as though, you know what I think has happened? The arrogance that the Yankees have, and that Mr. Steinbrenner has, excuse me, General von Steinbrenner has permeated to the press and to the citizens, to the fans.
Oh, but not every...
Oh, hit that home run. Just before Guerrero hit the home run, I said, come on, Pedro, put it in the seats.
I did too.
And someone said to me, wait a minute, it's 8-2. I says, with the Yankees, you never have enough runs.
I did.
The choice for manager of the year is Bob Lemon.
Oh, yes.
No, you want to know the real...
The president.
The real truth. The real truth is, George Steinbrenner really made sure the Yankees didn't win the World Series back in September. You know why?
Why?
He fired Gene Michael.
Yes.
Thank you, dear. No, I'm glad he did it, because if he didn't, I don't know if we would have won. Thank you, dear.
I was at one of the happiest points that I've been all year when the Yankees lost last night.
Attaboy.
I tell you, we were screaming and cheering here because we're all Yankee haters.
Ah, great. No wonder you're from Bensonhurst. That's Bob Grant country. That's vintage country.
You know, you have to take a lot of guff from the Yankee fans. They like to rub your face in it.
Yeah, Yankee fans are the most arrogant fans in the whole world. That's why I like to see the Yankees lose.
Same here.
They're demonstrating against the United States missiles being placed in that continent, but they're not saying anything about the emplacement of Soviet missiles in Europe. And once again, Bob, the mask has been ripped from the Soviet Union, exposing it for what it really is, the ever-conniving imperialist devil, because it was found that thermonuclear warheads were found on Soviet torpedoes in Swedish waters.
And am I glad it happened in Swedish waters, because those Swedes have not been particularly helpful to us these many years.
Oh, you know, Bob, I'm sick of their holier-than-thou attitude. What nerve they had in the 1960s to say that this country was comparable to Nazi Germany when we...
Well, that was Olof Palme, who really was a Soviet sympathizer.
Yes, and you know, Bob, Sweden allowed Nazis to move material across their country. They sold ball bearings to the Nazis during World War II, and they were in favor of this hoax they call the Nordic nuclear-free zone. And I just want to ask you, Bob, where are all these left-wing whackers in this country? How come they're not taking to the streets to protest this act of Soviet imperialist aggression?
because they've got it all wired. They've got the world wired their way, Frank, and you correctly used the parallel about Munich, Germany, and you're young enough, Frank, you will see by the year 2000, this country will not be the country that we even know today. It will not continue to exist as we know it. And the more I look around, the more I observe various sinister forces going on in the broadcasting field, in the publishing field, in industry, in government. Everywhere I look, I see that this is truly the beginning of the end. And Frank, you're one of the few people who correctly knows that it's the beginning of the end and knows why it's the beginning of the end. And for what it's worth, I don't know what you and I are going to do come the year 2000. We'll have to whisper in private.
Bob will be fighting side by side, shoulder to shoulder, till the end.
Shoulder to shoulder and boulder. People say, how can the guy sound so grim and make a joke? What else am I going to do? I mean, maybe we'll get one of your sons with one of my daughters together.
How about that? That would be nice.
Is what's his name well fixed?
He is.
He is. Good. We'll get together. Great. When, ladies and gentlemen, will we ever come to our senses and start putting away killers for good? Did you see where a New Brunswick man, that's in New Jersey, on parole for a 1974 murder, has been charged with robbing 2 Woodbridge jewelry stores at gunpoint? We're talking about Brian P. Cole, 25, charged with 2 counts of armed robbery. It seems that back in 1974, he shot to death wantonly and intentionally and with malice. How else would you shoot anybody? With Edward Callier. Shot him to death. And was given a life sentence. But a life sentence doesn't mean anything. Because here he is. He's been out since out for about I think he was paroled in June of 1979. So he barely served 5 full years. 4.5 years he served. And there's another story about a guy by the name of Russell Winston, picked up in Newark yesterday for robbery, who was a lifer in Rahway for murder, one of the originals on the Scared Straight program. So, apparently, there's no such thing as a life sentence. And the people like Hugh Carey who say they're against the death penalty because if we put them away for good, we get them off the streets forever. Well, it doesn't work that way, Governor. Your Excellency, with all due respect, even in the bank state make over 1 billion phone calls annually? Over 1 billion annually. That's more than the total number of calls made by the 265 million people living in the Soviet Union. Of course, in the Soviet Union, there's no point in calling anybody since everybody has to live with everybody else. Did you know that? The living space is so scarce that there are very, very few people, and most of them are party officials, who really have their own place. Most people have to live with the in-laws. That's why they drink so much vodka over there. You know, that they're drinking more vodka than ever over there in the Soviet Union. It dramatizes the dilemma we have in this country and the unfairness of labor leaders who are having a field day kicking around President Reagan and saying some of the most irresponsible, scurrilous things at the Sheraton Center, and yet they don't admit what you know, and that is that they're not part of the solution. They're part of the problem.
Liberal United States Senator in 1980.
I know, I did Ted Kennedy.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's wrong. The most liberal senator was Daniel Moynihan.
You're kidding. Who says?
The American Conservative Union.
No, more liberal than George McGovern?
Well, Moynihan tied McGovern for most liberal.
I don't believe it.
He voted to give away the Panama Canal, and he opposed cutting back on government spending. And you know, he helped develop our runaway welfare system.
Moynihan shares responsibility for our welfare system?
Yes, Daniel Daniel Moynihan must share responsibility for our runaway welfare system.
Gee, I didn't know that.
And he voted against capital punishment, opposed the B-1 bomber. He supports increased taxes. He even voted foreign aid to communist countries like Cuba, Cambodia, and Vietnam.
Wait, enough. What would happen if the people knew this?
He'd be defeated, which is why New York State taxpayers are fed up with Moynihan, and why the National Conservative Political Action Committee has paid for this commercial.
You did make it in. We'll be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Until then, this is Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Kaddafi.
People like yourself and Barry Farber should go a long way in this world.
By the way, I understand Barry Farber's Third Army just captured Prague.
Well, I'll tell you something. He's great. He introduced me to the book, The Spike. And
In fact, right now, as we speak, Barry Farber is the bombardier on a B-24 over Dresden.